Hi everyone, this is Lola and welcome to my YouTube channel. Now, looking at the title on the screen, Human Development and Sexual Health, I want to acknowledge that for some of you, this might feel like a big or even a slightly nervous topic. We're going to cover puberty, which will be a very quick review, as I'm going to assume that this has been covered extensively in previous grades. We will spend quite a bit of time on the reproductive system of both females and males. This will be the foundation, and understanding this will definitely help you understand birth control, which I will cover in another video. Because we're spending so much time on this, my goal isn't just to give you a bunch of facts to memorize. My goal is really to make sure that by the end of this presentation, you feel confident and you feel informed. So let's take a deep breath, settle in, and get started with the foundation of our curriculum. Now, let's get into our first topic, puberty. And like I said, this is just going to be a review. So I just want to see what you already remember from previous health classes on your own, or just your own knowledge. So think about this. What are some of the changes that occur to a male and female's body during puberty? There are different areas that we can look at, but the first thing we're going to look at is the physical. So think about the physical and chemical changes that happen as a person moves from childhood toward adulthood. What are some of the changes that occur to a male and female's body during puberty? I'll give you a moment to think and then we can share. Remember, we're using clinical scientific terms here to keep things professional and clear. So, as you can see, most of these fall into the physical category. We're talking about things like voice changes, skin changes, like getting acne, and overall body growth spurts. I've included some familiar characters here because even though it can feel strange when it's happening to you, these changes are a universal human experience. Whether it's starting to shave or dealing with skin breakouts, everyone goes through this process. It's the body's way of preparing you for adulthood. While we often focus on the physical side, like voice changes and skin changes and growth spurts, like we just talked about, puberty also brings a huge social shift. What do you think that is? Well, as you grow, your social relationships start to change. You might find that the influence of your peers becomes much stronger than it was when you were younger. This is also when we start seeing things like peer pressure come into play more often. It's a normal part of development, but it's something we need to be aware of so we can make the best decisions for ourselves. Finally, we have the emotional side. So, what do you think that is all about? It is very common to feel an increased intensity of feelings. Sometimes you might feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster. You might develop a new interest in relationships with others. It's also completely normal to feel confusion and have questions about changes you are experiencing. If you feel overly emotional, just know that your brain and hormones are working hard to catch up with your growing body. This brings us to a really important question. With all those changes happening, like the physical, the social, and the emotional, does everyone go through puberty at the same time? What do you think? Well, the short answer is a very clear no. While we all follow the same general biological roadmap, our internal clocks are all set differently. Some people start these changes much earlier than their peers, and some start much later. This can sometimes feel stressful if you feel like you're the only one changing, or the only one who hasn't changed yet. But it is completely normal. There's no a right age to start, and your body will move through these stages at the pace that is right just for you. So now that we've reviewed the physical and emotional and social side of, of puberty, we're going to take a closer look at the biology behind these changes. We are moving into the reproductive system. So, this is the part where our bodies are responsible for human growth and the ability to create new life. We're going to break this down into two parts. We will start with the female reproductive system, and later we will cover the male reproductive system, as I had said. As we go through these diagrams, I want you to focus on the scientific names for these parts and how they function together as a system. So, looking at this is the internal part of the female reproductive system. The line that shows the bottom part there, that would be on the external, but everything else is on the internal. So on this diagram, you can see two specific labels, the vaginal opening and the hymen. So if we look at the vaginal opening, it is the external entry. So you can see that from the outside. It is a passageway used for menstruation when you get your period. So that's how it leaves the body. And it's also the birth canal. That's how a baby comes out, right? Through the birth canal. The hymen, on the other hand, is a thin, flexible piece of tissue that partially surrounds or covers the vaginal opening. It's important to know that the hymen varies greatly from person to person. It can be different shapes or thicknesses, and it can naturally stretch or wear away over time through normal physical activities like sports or even just moving around. Remember, as we look at these diagrams, we are focusing on the biological function of each part. Next, where is this pointing to? It's further inward, and what is this called? Yes, we have the vagina. But people often use this word to describe the entire area. Scientifically, the vagina is specifically the internal muscular tube that connects to the next part. The vagina is a very flexible and elastic organ. Usually it's about 3 to 5 inches long, but it's also designed to stretch and expand when needed. It serves three very important roles in the reproductive system. Number one is menstruation. It is the passageway that allows menstrual flow to leave the body. So again, when you get your period, it has to go through there. The second thing is reproduction. It is where sperm is deposited during intercourse so it can travel toward the egg. And third, for childbirth. It is often referred to as a birth canal because it expands to allow a baby to pass from the uterus to the outside world. It's also important to note that the walls of the vagina stay moist thanks to natural fluids, which help keep the tissue healthy and protected. So, this is the external opening to the what? Where is that line pointing to? Yes, we are looking at the cervix. If you look at the diagram, the cervix and this is the small, sturdy, neck-like portion at the very bottom of the uterus. You can think of it as the bridge or the gateway between the vagina and the uterus. It has a very small opening, about the size of a straw. This opening performs a few important tasks. Number one, it protects. It stays mostly closed to protect the uterus from bacteria. Number two, it's a passage. It allows, again, menstrual blood to flow out from the uterus into the vagina. And three, Expansion. During childbirth, the cervix undergoes an incredible change called dilation, where it stretches significantly to allow a baby to pass through there. The cervix also produces different types of mucus that change throughout a person's cycle to either help or prevent sperm from entering the uterus. And we'll talk about that in another video. Moving on to this, I already used the word to describe what this is. And does anybody know what that word is? What are we looking at here? That's right, it's called the uterus, which is often also called the womb. If you look at the diagram, you'll see it's a pear-shaped, hollow organ with very thick muscular walls. Now, the uterus has two primary jobs. First, it supports growth. So, if an egg is fertilized, the uterus provides a safe, protected place for a fetus to grow. Its muscular walls are incredibly strong and can expand to many times their originally size during pregnancy. That's why you'll see a woman get bigger and bigger and bigger because the uterus is growing along with the baby. The menstrual cycle as well. If an egg is not fertilized, that's when you get your period. The lining of the uterus, which has thickened with blood and nutrients to prepare for a possible pregnancy, breaks down and leaves the body. And we'll talk about this later on in another video as well. Actually, no, we'll do it actually in this video. This is what we called a period or menstruation, when that blood leaves the body. It's an incredibly dynamic organ that is constantly changing throughout a person's monthly cycle. What are these two tubes called? That's right. Next, we have the fallopian tubes. These are two thin tubes. Do you know how big they are? They're basically roughly this width of a piece of spaghetti, and they extend from the upper corners of the uterus towards the ovaries. The fallopian tubes have two very specific and important jobs. One is it is the pathway. So each month when an ovary releases an egg, the fallopian tube catches it using tiny finger-like structures, and then the tube then uses these tiny hairs to gently sweep the egg towards the uterus. And the other thing is fertilization. This is a key fact. Fertilization usually happens right here in the fallopian tube. If sperm is present, it meets the egg in the tube before the egg ever reaches the uterus. If the egg isn't fertilized, it simply continues its journey to the uterus and eventually leaves the body during menstruation when you get your period. And finally, what are these? Yep, we've reached the ovaries. These are two small almond-shaped organs located on either side of the uterus. You can think of them as the control centers for the female reproductive system. The ovaries have two main functions. One is egg storage and release. So a person is actually born with all the eggs they will ever have, hundreds of thousands of them stored inside the ovaries. Starting at puberty, usually once a month, one ovary releases a mature egg in a process called ovulation. And the other thing it does is hormone production. The ovaries produce the primary female sex hormones. And what are those hormones called? We've talked about this in previous classes: estrogen and progesterone. These hormones are what trigger the changes of puberty we discussed earlier and regulate the monthly menstrual cycle. Without the ovaries, the rest of the system wouldn't receive the signals it needs to function. So they're really, really important. And here is a side view of everything not everything that we just covered, but most of it. So take a look at it. And if you have any questions, please ask away. We're now going to look at the vulva. And it's important to distinguish that while the vagina is internal, the vulva is the term for all the external parts. Now, I've included the anus here, and you can see it circled in red. And we begin here because it is in the view when looking at this anatomy. While the anus is part of the digestive system and not the reproductive system, uh, its proximity is why health professionals emphasize wiping front to back to keep bacteria away from the reproductive and urinary openings. So when you go to the washroom, you never want to wipe from back to front. It's always front to back. Next, we have the perineum. This is the area of skin and muscle located specifically between the bottom of the vaginal opening and the anus. While it might seem just like a small patch of skin, the perineum is actually very important for a couple of reasons. One, it supports, so it serves as a floor for the pelvic organs, helping to hold everything in its place. Second, for childbirth, this area is designed to be incredibly flexible. So during childbirth, the muscles of the perineum stretch significantly to allow the baby to pass through the birth canal. And for health and hygiene reasons, because this area sits between the reproductive and urinary openings and the digestive exit, keeping it clean is a key part of daily hygiene to prevent the spread of bacteria, as we just mentioned before. We are circling back to the hymen, which we spoke about earlier, to take a closer look as there are many misconceptions about it. As we mentioned, the hymen is a thin, flexible fold of tissue that surrounds the vaginal opening. It's important to understand a few key facts. It is not a seal. A lot of people think it's a piece of skin that just seals the vagina. That is not true. Um, if it did cover the vaginal opening, then menstrual blood would not be able to leave the body. It usually looks more like a small collar or a crescent moon of tissue. There's variation as well in the hymen. So every person's hymen is shaped differently. Some are very thin, some are thicker, and some people are even born with very little hymen tissue at all. The elasticity, the hymen is very stretchy. It can be stretched or worn away by many non sexual activities, things like horseback riding or gymnastics or bike riding, or even using tampons. So, the main takeaway I want for you to understand here is that the presence or the shape of the hymen is not a reliable indicator of someone's physical history. It is simply a natural, varied part of the anatomy. We are looking at the vaginal opening once more to ensure that we can clearly identify it in relation to the other parts of the vulva. As we've discussed, the vaginal opening is located between the urethral opening, where urine exits, comes out, and the perineum. It is the external doorway to the internal vaginal canal. It's important to remember its primary function. So, for menstruation, as we've talked about already, this is where the lining of the uterus exits the body during a period. And for reproduction, it is the entry point for sperm to travel towards the uterus. And again, for childbirth, it is the final part of the birth canal that allows a baby to enter the world. Because this opening is composed of muscular tissue, it is designed to be highly elastic, allowing it to expand and then to return to its original shape. Now we are looking at the labia, which are the lips or folds of skin that surround and protect the vaginal and urethral openings. There are two sets. There's the labia majora, which is the outer lips. These are the larger outer folds. They're typically covered with pubic hair after puberty and contain fat tissue to act as a cushion for the more sensitive inner parts. The labia minora, on the other hand, which are the inner lips, these are the smaller, thinner folds located inside the labia majora. They protect the openings to the urethra and the vagina. It's very important to know as well that there is no standard look for labia. They come in all different shapes, sizes, colors. In some people, the inner lips stick out past the outer lips. In others, they are tucked inside. Both are perfectly normal and healthy variations of human anatomy. Now we are looking specifically at the urethral opening. As we move from the top of the vulva downward, this is a small opening located just below the clitoris and just above the vaginal opening. It's very important to visually distinguish this from the vagina. So the function here, this is the exit point for the urinary system. Its only job is to allow urine to leave the body from the bladder. The size of it is significantly smaller than the vaginal opening. And for hygiene reasons, again, because of its location, it's really susceptible to bacteria. This is why, again, we emphasize to clean, have good cleaning habits like washing and proper wiping to prevent UTIs, which are urinary tract infections. In the female anatomy, the reproductive path and the urinary path are completely separate doorways, even though they are located so close to one another. Now we are looking at the clitoris. It is located at the very top of the vulva, where the inner labia meet. It is a small, highly sensitive organ. Unlike every other part of the reproductive system, as we have discussed so far, the uterus for growth, the ovaries for eggs, the vagina for birth, the clitoris is unique. Its only known biological purpose is physical sensation and pleasure. Here's a few key facts. So sensitivity. It contains thousands of nerve endings, making it the most sensitive part of the female anatomy. And the internal structure. While we usually only see small glands or tip on the outside, which is protected by a small fold of skin called the clitoral hood, the clitoris actually has a much larger internal structure that wraps around the vaginal opening. And its response during physical arousal, the clitoris fills with blood and becomes more firm, similar to how other reproductive tissues respond to stimulation. Finally, we look at the mons pubis. This is the rounded, fleshy area of fatty tissue located directly over the pubic bone, right at the front of the pelvis and just above the labia. The mons pubis serves two main purposes. One, for protection. It acts as a natural cushion or shock absorber to protect the pubic bone during physical activity. And it's a puberty indicator. As we discussed earlier, the mons pubis is where the majority of pubic hair grows once a person begins going through puberty. This hair helps to reduce friction and protect the sensitive skin of the vulva. It is the most visible part of the external anatomy when looking from the front. And like all other parts we've discussed, it varies in size and shape from person to person. And now we are going to move on to the whole thing. Since we've looked at each part individually, let's look at the vulva as a whole. It's important to remember that the word vagina only refers to the internal tube, while the vulva is the collective name for everything that you see here in red. We see this on the outside again. As you can see on this diagram, the vulva acts as a meeting point for three distinct body functions. We have the reproductive system, which includes the labia, the clitoris, and the vaginal opening. We have the urinary system. This is represented by the urethral open, which sits just above the vagina. That's where when you pee, that's where your pee comes out from. And we have the digestive system. While the anus is not part of the vulva, it is located just below the perineum. Because these three areas, reproductive, urinary, and digestive, are located so close together, it highlights why hygiene is so important again. Keeping this entire area clean and dry helps prevent infections from moving from one system to another. So this concludes our look at the female anatomy. Now that we know about the parts, let's talk about how they work together in a monthly rhythm called the menstrual cycle. On average, the cycle lasts about 28 days, though it's perfectly normal for it to be shorter or longer, especially when someone is just starting puberty. Before we get into the monthly cycle, we need to understand what is driving all these changes. We call them hormones. You can think of hormones as chemical text messages that are created in glands. There are two main messages we talk about in reproductive health. Estrogen, this is the primary hormone responsible for female development, and testosterone. This is the primary hormone that's responsible for male development. We'll talk about that later. Just like a message on your phone, which tells you where to meet your friends, these chemicals travel through the body to tell our organs how to grow and when to function. So once these text messages are sent, how do they get to their destination? Well, they don't have wires or Wi-Fi, so instead they hitch a ride through your bloodstream. The glands release the hormones directly into the blood, which carries them all over the body from your head to your toes. Even though they travel everywhere in the blood, they don't talk to every single cell. They travel to specific target organs to deliver their instructions. The target organs have special receptors, kind of like a lock that only certain keys can fit into. Once the hormone key finds the matching lock on the organ, the instruction is delivered and the organ knows exactly what to do. So we know what hormones are, how they travel, and where they go, but what is their actual job? You can think of hormones as the on switch for puberty. When the time is right, your brain signals glands to release these messengers, which then travel to the reproductive organs to begin the changes we've been talking about. So we know what hormones are, how they travel, and where they go, but what is their actual job? The on switch. Hormones are the on switch for puberty. They manage the entire reproductive system to keep it functioning correctly. You can think of hormones as the conductors of an orchestra, making sure everything happens in the right order from growing the lining of the uterus to signaling the ovaries to release the egg. Now we see those hormones in action through a process called ovulation. Unlike males who produce new sperm every day, females are born with their lifetime supply of sex cells, or ova, or eggs, stored right in their ovaries that you can see in red. Once the hormone estrogen starts being produced at puberty, it sends a message to the ovaries to ripen and release one ovum at a time. This release, ovulation, happens about once a month. The egg then travels into the fallopian tubes. As you can see, actually fallopian tube because it's happening on one side. By the look at the red arrow, it shows you where that is in the diagram. But what happens if that egg isn't fertilized? Well, the uterus had spent the month building up a thick, soft lining of blood and tissue to prepare for a baby. If it's not needed, the body cleans house basically. the lining breaks down and leaves the body through the vagina. This is what we called menstruation or a period. Even though it might look like a lot of blood, it's actually only a few tablespoons spread out over several days. It's a completely natural sign that the reproductive system is working exactly as it should. Since menstruation involves blood leaving the body, people use different products to stay clean and comfortable. There isn't just one right way to manage a period. Everyone chooses a product that fits in their lifestyle best. In the next few slides, we're going to look at the different tools available to catch or absorb the blood, how to use them, and how often they need to be changed. So the first one we have here are pads, or also called sanitary napkins. So to explain how pads work, how they are used, and why they are often the starting point for many people, the most common product people start with is the pad. Unlike tampons or cups, pads are worn externally, meaning they stay outside the body. This is how they're used. Attachment on them. So they have this, pads have this adhesive strip on the back that sticks to the inside of your underwear or to keep it in place. And some of them have wings, which are extra flaps of material on the sides that wrap around the edges of your underwear to help prevent leaks. They come in many different lengths and thicknesses. They're panty liners as well for very light days, regular or average flow, and overnight pads that are longer and thicker for when you're sleeping. Just like other products, pads need to be changed regularly, usually every 4 to 8 hours, or sooner if they feel full or heavy. Pads are a great option because they are very easy to use. They don't require anything to be inserted into the body, and you can easily see when it's time to change them. Tampons are another product that are used when menstruating. So I'm going to explain it here. Unlike a pad, that sits in your underwear. A tampon is an absorbent plug made of soft cotton or rayon that is inserted into the vagina to catch the blood before it leaves the body. They come in different sizes or absorbency levels, like light, regular, or super. And you should always use the lowest absorbency needed for your flow. Many tampons come with a plastic or cardboard applicator to help slide the tampon into place. Once it's in there, in the correct spot, you shouldn't be able to feel it at all. Every tampon has a sturdy string attached to the end that hangs outside the body. This is what you pull on when it's time to remove it. And for safety and hygiene, a tampon must be changed every 4 to 8 hours. A really important safety note, because tampons are worn inside internally, leaving one in for too long, say more than 8 hours, can actually increase the risk of a rare but serious infection called TSS, known as toxic shock syndrome. So always remember to change your tampon regularly and use a pad if you plan on sleeping for more than 8 hours. And finally, we come to the last one here, and it's the option for managing a period, and it's called a menstrual cup. So, unlike pads or tampons that absorb blood, the cup is a small, flexible, bell shaped device made of medical grade silicone or rubber that collects the blood instead. A few things that you need to know. The cup is folded and inserted into the vagina where it pops open and creates a light seal against the walls to prevent leaks. Because it collects rather than absorbs, it can often hold more liquid than a heavy duty tampon or pad. And most menstrual cups are eco friendly because they're reusable. After a few hours, usually up to about 12, you simply remove it, empty the blood into the toilet, wash the cup with soap and water, and reinsert it. A single cup can last for several years if you care for it properly, which makes it very cost effective and a green choice. It does take a little bit of practice to get used to inserting and removing it, but many people find it to be a very comfortable and convenient option once they get the hang of it. So, in class, for teachers here, I will insert the video that you can watch over here just to go through everything again. And you'll see that in the description area. So let's talk about ovulation and menstruation again. Baby girls are born with approximately 1 to 2 million immature eggs in their ovaries. This number represents their entire lifetime supply, as no new eggs are created after birth. So when you're born, you're created with all these eggs. But by the time puberty hits, your ovaries will carry between 300,000 to 500,000 eggs. So, beginning at puberty, the ovaries release an ovum about once a month. Most of the time, the ovum does not meet with the sperm with the sperm cell in the fallopian tube, and it then just simply dissolves. 2 weeks later, the lining that had been building up in the uterus is not needed and will slowly flow out of the cervix through the vagina to the outside of the body. This is called menstruation or getting your period. So you can see on this picture the egg that is in the ovary, and you can see the inside the uterus, the blood is the lining of the uterus is getting thicker with blood, and that's called the endometrium. So once that mature egg exits, um, this is when the whole ovulation process takes place. This is the official release of a mature ovum from the ovary. As you can see by the arrow in the diagram, the egg pops out of the ovary and is swept into the fallopian tube. At the same time, like I just said, the lining of the in the uterus continues to thicken even more, becoming even plusher and more prepared. Once the egg is released during ovulation, it is only viable, so able to actually fertilize for about 12 to 24 hours. That's it. That's all it gets, 12 to 24 hours to be fertilized. The ovum continues its slow travel through the tube, as you can see by the arrow moving. And you see it here again. And finally, again, it's still moving and it's almost close to the uterus. And you can see that in the uterus, the lining of the uterus really is quite thick compared to before because it's actually preparing for a possible pregnancy. And the ovum continues its slow travel through the tube. And now you'll notice in the diagram that the lining in the uterus, as I said, is at its thickest point. The body is fully prepared to support a pregnancy at this stage of the cycle. If the egg doesn't meet a sperm cell during this window, the message to keep that thick lining will soon change. Finally, if the egg is not fertilized, the body realizes the cradle it built isn't needed for this month, and the thick lining of the blood and tissue breaks down and leaves the body through the vagina. This is menstruation or a period. The body sheds the lining to reset and start the whole process over again next month. It's a sign that the cycle is working exactly as it should. And these are the phases of the menstrual cycle. If you look at day 1 of your cycle, what's happening? Because the pregnancy didn't happen last month, the uterus sheds its lining, the cushion it built up. The vibe, you might feel kind of tired, crampy, or just want to curl up with a heating pad. And usually we know that the length is approximately 3 to 7 days. Then we get the follicular phase. And what's happening here? Your brain sends a signal to your ovaries to start maturing an egg inside a small sac called a follicle. At the same time, your estrogen levels start to rise, which begins thickening the uterine lining again. How do you feel? As estrogen goes up, you often feel a boost of energy, mood, and brain power. You're moving from hibernation back into the world. And this happens for about 10 to 14 days. And sometimes that overlaps with your period. And then we have the ovulation or fertility phase. And what's happening here is a surge of hormones causes the ovary to release the most mature egg into the fallopian tube. This is the only time in the cycle you can actually get pregnant. The egg only lives for about 12 to 24 hours, as I said before. Many people feel at this point feel they're most confident or glowy during this phase. You might notice a change in vaginal discharge where it becomes clear and stretchy like raw egg whites. And you would see that in your underwear, obviously. And usually this happens right in the middle of the cycle around day 14. And the luteal phase is what's happening here is the body waits to see if the egg was fertilized. So progesterone rises to keep the uterine lining thick and sticky. And if there's no pregnancy that occurs, hormone levels eventually crash. This is where PMS or premenstrual syndrome lives. The drop in hormones can lead to bloating, breakouts, mood swings, or sore breasts. And this length of time that it can go on for is almost always 14 days, which then adding all these days up would be about a 28-day cycle. So, how often does the period come? As I just said, a typical cycle is often tracked as a 28-day cycle, but everyone again is different. Sometimes a person might miss their period while pregnancy is a well-known reason. There are many other reasons why you aren't 28 days regularly on this on that day. Sometimes it could be high levels of stress that you're going through. Um, if you're a high level athlete, certain medications or birth control methods as well can change that. Health conditions like PCOS or polycystic ovary syndrome, or if you're even much older and entering menopause, and breastfeeding as well can do that. So, can a female who has never had a menstrual cycle get pregnant? What do you think? Yes or no? And not just yes or no, but why as well. So, yes, you can. Ovulation happens before menstruation. It's uncommon, but it is possible for a woman who hasn't yet had her period to become pregnant. That's because young women ovulate, release eggs from their ovaries before they actually have their first period. Pregnancy occurs when a fertilized egg attaches to the lining of the uterus. So, as soon as a woman has begun ovulation, she can actually become pregnant. Once again, teachers, I will post the video that I'm showing here. So, cramps. Oh, those are really painful at times. So, the process of clearing out the uterine lining can be really uncomfortable for some people. Period cramps occur because the uterus contracts to shed its lining. These contractions are often triggered by prostaglandins, which are hormone like substances that cause inflammation and pain. Sorry, girls. So now that we've explored the female anatomy and the menstrual cycle, we're going to shift our focus to the male reproductive system. Just like the female system, this set of organs is designed to produce, store, and transport specialized cells called gametes. sex cells. While the female system is built to release an egg and potentially support a pregnancy, the male system is primarily designed for creating male sex cells called sperm and transporting that sperm so it can reach the female reproductive system. Producing testosterone, which, as we discussed earlier, is the primary hormone responsible for male development as well. So once again, this picture, you can see part of it on the outside. Part of this picture you would see on the outside of the external part of a male's body, and part of it is the internal. And I'll go through it with you. So that line is pointing to what exactly? And that's on the outside. What do you think that is? Yep, it's the urethra. In the male anatomy, the urethra is a tube that runs through the center of the penis to the outside of the body. It's so unique because it serves two different systems. Not only does it have the urinary system, where it carries urine from the bladder to be released from the body, but it's also part of the reproductive system. It acts as the exit ramp for semen. Um, the fluid containing sperm during ejaculation. Because the urethra handles both fluid types, the body has a built in safety valve. When the reproductive system is active, the opening to the bladder is temporarily closed off so that urine and semen do not mix. This ensures that the environment is safe for the sperm as they leave the body. This next part are the testicles, also known as the testes. These are two egg-shaped glands that sit inside a protective pouch called the scrotum, and that again is on the outside. These testicles have two important jobs. One is sperm production. So this is where the male sex cells called sperm are created. They're created in the testes. While females are born with all their eggs, males actually start producing sperm at puberty, and they can continue to make millions of new ones every single day. It's a hormone factory. The testicles are also responsible for producing testosterone. As we learned earlier, this is the primary hormone that signals the body to grow hair, to deepen the voice, and build muscle during puberty. Think of the testicles as the engine room of the male reproductive system. Without the sperm and the hormones produced here, the rest of the system wouldn't have a message to follow or a cell to deliver. And what are we pointing out here? This is again on the outside of the body. The final external part of the male anatomy we'll discuss is the penis. It is the organ used for both urination and sexual reproduction. Here is how it functions within the system we've been studying. So, the penis is made of spongy tissue that can be filled with blood. As you mentioned earlier, the urethra runs through the penis to allow for the passage of both urine and semen. During sexual activity, the penis becomes firm, which is an erection, which allows it to deliver sperm into the female reproductive system so that fertilization can occur. It's important to remember that just like the female anatomy, this system is highly regulated by the hormones we discussed at the beginning of the lesson. Next, we have the scrotum. And this is the loose pouch of skin that I talked about before that hangs behind the penis and holds the testicles in place. You can think of it as a protective climate control suit for the sperm factory. It's so important to produce healthy sperm. The testicles need to stay about 2 to 3 degrees cooler than the rest of the body's internal temperature. And the scrotum is designed to move. When the body is cold, the scrotum pulls the testicle closer to the body to stay warm. When the body is hot, it hangs lower to let them cool down. It acts as a cushioned barrier to protect the delicate internal structures of the testes from injury. Without this specific temperature regulation, the engine room we talked about wouldn't be able to produce the millions of sperm cells needed for production. So you can see that the scrotum is really important. And here, what is this? This is the prostate gland, and this is a walnut-sized gland located just below the bladder and surrounding the urethra. This is on the inside. So its primary job, it produces a fluid, a thin, milky white fluid that makes up a large portion of the semen. This fluid is slightly alkaline, so it's the opposite of acidic, which helps protect the sperm. Since the female reproductive tract is naturally acidic, this fluid acts as a shield to keep the sperm alive and healthy on their journey. During ejaculation, the muscles of the prostate gland contract to help squeeze the fluid into the urethra and propel the semen forward. Because the prostate is wrapped around the urethra, it acts as a gatekeeper. When it's time for the reproductive system to do its job, the prostate helps ensure the semen has everything it needs to reach its destination successfully. And here we're looking at what? It's the two tubes on the side, on either side. And those are called the vas deferens. So they are actually the long distance transport system for sperm. If the testicles are the factory, the vas deferens is the long distance delivery highway. This is what you need to know about these important tubes. There are two of them, one for each testicle, sorry, and they are long muscular tubes that travel from the epididymis up into the pelvic cavity. Their main job is to transport mature sperm towards the urethra in preparation for ejaculation. The vas deferens also acts as a storage area where sperm can stay until they are ready to be moved out of the body. Along the way, the vas deferens passes other glands like the prostate and seminal vesicles that add fluid to the sperm to create semen. Without this highway, the sperm would have no way to get from the engine room to the exit ramp we talked about earlier. And finally, what are these? Yep, these are the seminal vesicles. They're two small sac-like glands located near the base of the bladder. If the testicles are the factory and the vas deferens is the highway, think of the seminal vesicles as a fueling station. Here's how they contribute to the system. They produce a fluid rich in fructose, like a type of sugar. This acts as an energy drink for the sperm, giving them the fuel they need to swim once they enter the female reproductive tract. About 60 or 70% of the total volume of semen is actually produced by these vesicles, the seminal vesicles. They connect directly to the vas deferens to form their ejaculatory duct, ensuring the sperm and the fuel are mixed together right before they enter the urethra. Without the seminal vesicles, sperm would be running on empty and wouldn't have the stamina to complete their journey. All right, moving on. One of the circled areas on our diagram is the foreskin. That's the circled part at the top, as you can see in red. This is a retractable fold of skin that covers and protects the head of the penis. It serves as a protective layer for the sensitive tissue underneath. Sometimes we're going to talk about circumcision, where some males have the skin surgically removed shortly after birth for religious or cultural reasons, and it's called circumcision. Whether a person is circumcised or not circumcised, uncircumcised, the reproductive system still functions in exactly the same way. The second circled area is the scrotum. You can see at the bottom of the page in red. And this is the external pouch of skin that holds and protects the testicles I talked about. And obviously, we talked about the temperature control. So the scrotum will pull the testes up towards the body to keep it warm, or if it's a really hot day, they will drop keep it cooler. Um, and as we know, it can shrink or expand when it does this. Um, and again, it's a cushioned barrier for the testes. So we want to keep it nice and protected. Finally, let's talk about erections. So as you can see in the comparison diagram, an erection happens when extra blood fills the spongy tissue of the penis. This blood flows, making the penis harder, larger, and causes it to stand out from the body. Erections are a normal biological process that happens throughout a male's entire lifetime, starting from the time of birth. And they can happen for many reasons, sometimes due to physical stimulation, but often they occur randomly as the body grows and develops during puberty. And now we're going to talk about sperm production. So, as we move on to sperm production, also known by the scientific name spermatogenesis, unlike the female system where all eggs are present at birth, sperm production doesn't start until a male is partway through puberty. This usually happens after other changes have begun, such as the growth spurt, development of the genitals, and the appearance of pubic and underarm hair. Creating a single sperm is actually a slow process. It takes about 70 days for each sperm to be fully created in the testicles. However, because the body is constantly starting new batches, once the process begins at puberty, millions and millions of new sperm are produced every single day. This ensures a continuous supply is always ready. The journey begins right here in the testicles or testes, as we learned. These are the glands responsible for making the male sex cell or sperm. At this stage, the sperm are being formed and will soon be ready to begin their journey through the rest of the system. Once the sperm are ready to move, they traveled through the highway, the vas deferens. You can see it in the diagram how these tubes act as a long highway carrying the sperm from the lower part of the system up towards the pelvic area. This is the transport phase of that gets the sperm ready to be mixed with semen. You can see the sperm in blue there. They continue to travel through the vas deferens, which is quite the highway, and you see it again over here. And continuing, and finally, as the sperm travel, they aren't alone. They mix with that whitish fluid produced by the prostate gland and the seminal vesicles. Remember, this mixture of sperm and fluid is called semen. This fluid is vital because it helps the fragile sperm cells stay alive and gives them the ability to move or swim once they leave the body. And you can see how they're moving through right now. The semen is fully formed here. The sperm have been fueled up by the fluids from the glands and are now moving into the urethra. And we see them here moving along, moving along. And at this point, the body is prepared for the final stage of the journey, the exit from the body. The final step is when the semen leaves the body through the urethra. This only happens when the penis is erect or firm, and this release is called ejaculation. It generally happens at the same time as an orgasm, which is an intense, pleasurable feeling that occurs at the peak of sexual excitement. It's important to know that people of all ages and genders can experience orgasms. And that is the end of our presentation. We will continue with another video to explain some other things in this unit. Hope you enjoyed the video.